Hey! Welcome to the next devlog for Rosenthorn, devlog number 4, I think? I think we're on 4 right now. I'm feeling like that's true. Let me double check. Yep, number 4. So we have a lot, right? Like, we have a bunch. We have a bunch to talk about today. Before I get into, like, the nitty-gritty of, like, what I programmed, and, like, everything like that I had to do, like engine-wise, I first want to shout out 2 people. For one, I want to shout out my boy No Thank You, who made the chiptune that you heard before and that you're hearing right now. He made this this thing basically out of the goodness of his heart, and it's really cool. I like it, and it's good. And for 2, I also want to shout out Jewel on Twitter. He also is helping with the art. Like all this tile set, all these new tile sets you see here, this nice looking grass, this fucking great looking grass, and this the tile set of the tree stump and stuff. That's all Jewel. Those 2 did some great work for me. Basically for nothing. Check them out. Links in the description. All over them. Follow them on whatever page they're on. And give them money if they accept it, because they're good people. Now, moving on. We have done a lot of shit this week. Not as much, honestly, as I wanted to, but we made some good, decent progress. So, in case you're wondering how I'm doing the audio for this, Godot has a audio stream player node built in, where you basically just drop an audio file. You can change some stuff about it. For example, you can set it to autoplay so that it plays as soon as you enter the scene. You can set its volume, basically, the decibel level, and you can also, there's also some things you can mess with in the import. If I go to the audio, just so you can see it. Here we have some import settings. This is already sounding 8-bit, so I don't know if you put in a real song, like not a real song, but like a fucking a classical sounding song or something. I don't know how good its 8-bit thing is. I don't know how good its compressors are. I know it has a compressor somewhere. It has some audio settings you can mess with, certainly. But I didn't mess with any of them. So the next thing I wanted to cover is actually the tile sets. Because as you can see, the tile sets are kind of dynamic, where like, especially the tree stump, I can show you real fast. If I go to the tree stump, there's only one thing I can choose from here. If I paint with it, as you can see, it's you know, dynamically changing based on what's around it. So how did I do that? Well, Godot has an auto tiling function built in. Now, as I understand it, this is going to be streamlined in the stable 3.1 that's going to be coming out soon for Godot. But I'll just briefly show you exactly how to do this in Godot 3.0. It's a bit of a task, but it's pretty simple. It's just tedious. So if I go to the stump, which is where I'm storing these tiles, I go into the tile set. Now I have to have set up a scene already. That's something that's going to be changing in 3.1. But if I had to have made a scene for this. So what I did was I just imported a texture that looks like this. Now I don't think it has to necessarily look like this, but this is what like I think is easiest to kind of represent. So. Yeah, you have to set up this scene, and then I have to, like, same as other tile maps, I have to export it as a tile map. And then, after I exported it as a tile set, rather, I gotta look at it from here. So I click on this, and then I see this tile set, this tile in my tile set. And that's just represented by, like, this whole thing. But, after you do that, so one thing you gotta do, actually, is, you gotta include a shape here. So the shape resource, you have to set a shape first, a collision shape basically. And then after that, you gotta set is auto tile to on. And then after you set auto to on, this thing will appear. So first off, make sure you set your appropriate tile size. And the bitmask mode, it doesn't have to be 3x3, but I found 3x3 to be the easiest to work with, rather than the 2x2. And then you can start messing with it. So this is just the icon. It just shows you kind of like what each one looks like by themselves, each tile. It'll split like this based on the tile size here. If this was 64 by 64, I'll just change it real fast. It'll look like this, where it takes 4 squares and it fucks everything up. So I'll go back to 32 by 32, and that'll set everything back the way it was. So now the bit mask. The bit mask is the part where the bit mask is where the auto tiling happens. So what you gotta do is you gotta fill in the parts that do not repeat. I mean, well, rather the parts that do repeat, but the parts that are copied basically. So like this is the border, right? I want the border to basically be about all of these edges. That's a good way of looking at it. You want to fill in whatever you want to kind of internally repeat, essentially. And then the outside will change dynamically based on, like the neighbors, as calculated by whatever algorithm they use for this thing. I'm sure it's very complicated under the hood. And then the collision is very simple. Like all these have the same collision. It's a bit tedious. You have to do each of these boxes one at a time. So I had to fill in each of these boxes, yeah, but it wasn't too bad. It was just making a bunch of boxes, and I went the extra mile because some of these have like corners that I decided to represent. I didn't have to. I don't think it actually really does anything. Then if you want to add occlusion, that's occlusion rather. That's if you wanted light effects, basically. I might have that later on, and I might show you guys how I do that later on. But for now, I don't need it, and then none of this stuff actually, like, I haven't messed with it at all. I don't know exactly what it's for, but this is all you need to set up auto tiling. Just set up the bit mask and the collision. And there's a couple cool things you can do with auto tiling that, like, isn't necessarily immediately apparent. So this is something I did with auto tiling, but I also did this grass down here. So we have two grass. Let me move Rose for a second because she's kind of in the way. Oh, this grass, this nice looking fucking grass that Jules made. Anyway, so I have this nice looking grass here, and you might be thinking, hey, did you just like put because I have these I have certain if I go to open the scene over here, you can see I have these grasses. And there are a bunch of different kinds of grasses, right? But I actually did the same exact thing with the auto tiling. As you can see, I only have two grass tiles I can place, and I'll just delete some of it and put it back in. As you can see, it's changing up, like as I place them, and it's like yeah. Let me reset it though because I liked how it looked before. And same thing with the small grass. If I just delete this area and put it back, that's I actually think. Did they just do the same thing? Cool. Yeah. So, as you can see, you can mess with it a little bit and get some nice automation going. So you don't have to like spend too much time. It gets a little janky though, because like sometimes it doesn't quite work out. Like if I just I'll do it somewhere where it won't be consequential. Like if I do it up here, as you can see, it's doing a kind of repetitive pattern, but you can change it up a little bit by deleting and placing some them over in some areas. Yeah, there's certain things you can do about it, and it's kind of neat. And I'll just show you real fast how I did that one, at least the first one. And it's a very simple thing. I just figured, like, based on the logic of the last one and how these seem to connect to each other, I just made a straight line. Just a straight line, and that seemed to have gotten me like a desired like functionality. I don't know if there's any way to mess with it to kind of get a specific pattern out or something, but I thought this was a pretty nice thing that that I got out of messing with the auto tiling. So auto tiling is pretty neat, pretty powerful. You can do a lot with it. And that's basically it. So that's what that's why I did it in terms of the tiles and the auto tiling and the music. Now let's get into the nitty gritty of the code. So what have I done in the code recently? So, there was a couple things I did with Rose. There was a couple things that weren't quite up to snuff with the detection of enemies and stuff, with the raycasts. I fixed that. I don't have to go over it. I just figure I'll let you know that I did that. Maybe I'll, if you ask me on stream, come to twitch.tv/TioDevs. I changed it. Or TODevs, if you so choose to pronounce it that way. And it's just like I decided to change it to be more on brand with, you know, my YouTube channel, my Twitter, all my, like, kind of unify everything. I changed it to that. You can check me out there and ask me specific questions if you like about what I'm doing here. Again, twitch.tv/TioDevs, link in the description. Other than that, I also kind of cleaned up some of my coding in general. In a more general sense, I've created more hierarchy in my objects. This has to do with rows as well. I created an actor script, which all the other kind of characters in the world inherit, including rows, including the enemies. All of them are going to inherit this. All of them that I fight, anyways, are going to inherit this, or all of them that will fight, I guess, not necessarily that like the player will fight. Will inherit this in order to kind of like get rid of some code duplication. One thing that I did do, I have to explain a little bit, is this the separation from the process delta and the execute delta. So for my main like creatures, their main kinematic bodies, they each have a script in them, and generally I was working off of process and physics process delta functions. However, the thing about these functions is, the thing about these built-in Godot functions is that you can't overload them. Like the functions with this little, like basically all the functions with this little underscore before them, you can't overload them. Which basically means overloading is a thing in programming where if you have a function name in a lower level function. So for example, in this actor class, I said function, I meant class. A lower level function in this actor class, I can override it by calling the same method somewhere else. So, for example, it's execute delta function. It doesn't have anything in it, but it's my own defined function. So if I go down the rows, I have this execute delta function that I have stuff in. And this execute delta function is different from the execute delta function of, let's say, a wood eater or something. So yeah, this is basically I call the execute delta function from the process function, and all of the actors will run this because I don't do anything else with the process delta function and anyone else. But they'll all call this function, which I can then overload. This allows me to have unique code for each one that all shares the same sort of base. Yeah, it's very useful, very useful. And then all this stuff, all the various creatures all have the same exact stuff in them. So I just paste it over here, and now all the creatures, including rows, will have the same exact sort of thing going on. Now that I'm looking at it, I haven't explained these export variables. They're very simple. So I found out about the export keyword in Godot, and what that does, it exports a variable to the scene interface, so that you can change the variables from the script inside these from over here, basically. See, I have max HP, damage, speed. These aren't node variables; these are script variables. And so if I export them, as I have in the actor, mainly the actor script, it'll appear in all of the various creatures that inherit it. So as you see, this wood eater inherits it, the charger inherits it, the wasp inherits it, everything inherits it. Now, there's obviously one more thing about that I've started that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is this boss monster, the final piece of the puzzle, so to speak. So I've started implementing this boss monster, and it has a few moves. It's not done yet, but it's got a bunch of functionality already. It's got a bunch of functionality already that I think is cool. So let's get into it and explain through what the boss monster is about. Here we have our wood eater queen larva. It's like a baby queen of these wood eater things, the things that are eating this tree, this giant tree. And you gotta fight it. So it's got a lot going on with its nodes. I guess we should go over that first. That's what we usually do. So first, it has a collision polygon 2D. This is just its physics collision. Yeah, it's pretty simple. And then it has a damage player area. Oh, that reminds me of that. Something I forgot to mention totally was about this damage player area. So I've made it such that each of the every damage hitbox will also have a damage type associated with them, so that I can ignore the kinds of hitboxes that I'm contextually immune to, based on whatever attack I'm initiating. So currently, this creature has a slash hitbox, but in its final iteration, it'll only have a bash hitbox. And so you'll have to, it'll be immune to your slash attacks, and so I killed it, as you saw earlier, I killed it with my slash attacks, but in the final iteration, you can't kill it with just the slash attacks. In fact, it's immune by default to your slash attacks. You have to bash it a few times and get it to stun. And once it's stunned, you can hit it with your slash attack. That's why it has a blue underbelly. So you can hit it with your slash attacks when it's stunned, and then you'll be able to kill it that way. But for now, I have it like this, just so I can defeat it pretty easily as I'm showing you the thing, and you saw some of its abilities. We'll get into it. And then it has a bash hitbox, but of course, again, I'm making it a slash thing just so I can test it, make sure it's dying and stuff. So yeah, I imported most of those sprites onto here. As you can see over here, they all do something. All the sprites in here, at least, are implemented as things that it can do. And then I have some phases. So this is kind of complicated. This is what's called a hierarchical finite state machine, as opposed to my regular finite state machines, which you've seen elsewhere a bunch of times. All that means is just that it basically has super states, where the most lower level state, or I guess the highest level depending on how you look at it, are these right here, and they have some similar names as what you're used to. They have a default state, this thing has a default state, a slam state, a bite state, a charge state, etc. But in addition to its standard functionality, it can also be burrowed or unburrowed. In phase 1, it cannot actually be burrowed, but later on, it'll be able to be burrowed, and it has separate functionality from that. So I'm going to have to create some new scripts, or some scripts based on these scripts, for the burrowed state. And also, it has phases, so each phase will have also slightly different functionality. So to talk about that, let's get into the script. So here I made a comment about the script. It handles states and phases. So there's 3 phases. The first phase is that it'll bite, charge, and slam, and it'll move fairly slowly. But as it ramps up the phases, it'll start moving more quickly, and it gains more abilities. So in the second phase, it gains burrow, and it's a bit faster. It also shoots acid from its burrow, and can do a burrow charge, which is like this charge from one side of the screen to the other, depending on where it is. It'll basically exit its burrow and enter it on the other side, and it might hit you along the way. And then number 3, it's a bite combo. So as you saw the second bite that I had before earlier, it'll start entering that combo now, and it'll move even faster. It'll do a bite from a burrow, like a quick little swipe outside of its burrow. If you're not on your toes, you won't be able to dodge it. And eventually, it'll have an acid laser sort of deal. Not really a laser, but a beam of acid, basically, that'll come out very quickly and kind of be a surprise as a kind of final special move. Not a final special, not a final move. Not a final move, but a kind of capstone attack that it does out of desperation to try to kill you. And so now move on to the actual code bit. So here I have my phases. It works exactly like my dictionary for my states. And then I have a burrowed, which again is a super state. And I have some variables for that. I'll explain as I go down. And I have this flipped variable that might become obsolete depending on some things. Because you see, I started using a built-in Godot thing where you can flip the sprite as opposed to flip the entire object. Though for my other enemies, I need to flip the entire object, not just the sprite. And the direction variable isn't it's not. I can't just use the direction variable. I need to flip the entire fucking thing. I can't just flip the a variable and the sprite. I need to flip everything, because it has certain directional things that I need to look at. But for this, it doesn't have those things. So maybe I could just do it this simply. In any case, let's move on. And here I reset my states because this inherits from enemy. So enemy already has states set, but I can override it in my ready thing, and it'll change the functionality entirely. And again, this is all just standard kind of instantiation. You've seen this stuff before. So its execute delta function is pretty much the same as all the others. I probably don't really have to do this, but I'll do it anyways because I might want to do something special here. It just detects if the creature is killed or not, and also switches to a new animation based on whatever it's doing. Next is the physics execute, which is again the physics function that is called whenever the physics process function is called. First, I have this if active. So active is a variable where, like, so if I go over here, if I'm all the way over here, obviously I don't want the creature over here moving and attacking and doing stuff, because it could lead to some jankiness. So I have this if active thing where I have a trigger actually. So this is probably represented by something else later on. But for now, I have this rotted bark thing, which you've seen before, which is breakable by my bash attacks. If I break this, essentially, I have a signal getting called out that if it's destroyed, it'll send a signal to this thing, to the Wood Eater Queen. And here the signal matches with the function. I set active to true and I start a timer, and basically that starts up. It basically, like, the time, you can think of the timer as like a kind of a, you know, those gear powered like toys and stuff where you where you twist the knob thing and it'll work. I forget what it's called. Yeah, it's like that basically, where I turn the knob, I twist it up, and then it starts actually moving around and stuff. So if it's not active, I basically do nothing with anything. If it is active though, I start messing with stuff. So first off is this phase switcher. I don't have the phases implemented, so like if I move to different phases, it'll just crash because it doesn't have scripts for the other phases. So I just comment that out for now. And when I implement them, I'll start using them properly. So this creature works a little bit differently from the other creatures, where the other creature just chase Rose indiscriminately. This creature doesn't just chase Rose. I want it to behave more like a boss, more intelligently, where like it's not just going to charge at its prey. It's gonna, like, you know, move back and forth a little bit. So, but it's always looking at Rose. So this helps me do that. It just always looks at Rose. It's better, like, and only when it's in its default state, because basically when it's attacking, I want it to commit to the attack and not really worry where Rose is necessarily. And here I have my state machine, and this is basically what it has to look like if I need to do if I want to do a hierarchical state machine, where I get I get my phases, and then from that phase I get whether or not I'm burrowed, or the creature's burrowed rather, and then I get whatever state is I'm actually on, whatever like sub-state I'm on, and then I execute delta, which works exactly like my execute delta in all of my other state machines. And this is just basic physics stuff. I make some exceptions based on certain abilities that the creature has, and then I have this down here, which is decision maker basically. So as you recall, over here I start the action timer, which is basically a timer that times out whenever the creature is done doing its action. So when it first starts, it's in its default state, and I twisted the knob. It's now running, and at the end of whatever time it chose, based on this random range from 2 to 4, on that timeout, it'll make a new decision, and I instantiate it with a kind of default wait time. But so, like, other things will reset the wait time as it needs to. So first off, it has a 10% chance to just move a bit. So if the decision is less than or equal to 1 or less than or equal to 10, and also the decision is the make decision function from my enemy, which just it just picks a number from 1 to 100. That's all it does. So if it's greater than or equal to 1, and less than or equal to 10, that's a 10% chance, it'll just move around a little bit. Then it has a 15% chance to either burrow or slam. This depends on its phase. So if it's beyond phase 1 and it hits this, it'll burrow. If it's not, it'll just slam because it doesn't have the burrow capacity yet. And then it has a 10% chance to slam, which, you know, based on these numbers, and a 20% chance to bite. Again, simple. 15% chance to charge. I haven't implemented this, so I overrid the charge with just walking around. Again, this will be changed in the future, of course, when I implement the charge. And then it has a 20% chance to shoot or bite. Of course, it doesn't shoot if it's not in the if it's not in phase 1, then it can shoot. If it's not, if it is in phase 1, then it'll just bite. Then it has a beam or move, and this is when it's in phase 3 rather. If it's in phase 3, it'll beam attack. If it isn't, it'll just move a little bit. All of this comes out to about 45% chance to bite, I think. I'm not going to calculate it right now. A 25% chance to slam, and a remaining chance that's I think 20% chance to move. So that's the state machine basically. This is how it chooses to go between different things. And so let's get into the states and figure out, okay, so like what do the states actually look like? What do they do? What does this thing do underneath the hood? So first, it's default state. And this is very similar to our enemy's default states, except it's always look at the player, and always has a predisposition to move towards the player, so there's a 60% chance to move towards the player, and a 20% chance to not move towards the player. That's all this is. And it'll change direction based on that. And then, it'll essentially go. Like, this is the go function from our Wood Eater. Go back a devlog if you want to have that explained. It's a little bit different here, but it's basically the same concept. And then it has a special case where if the player is close enough, it has a chance to try to snap at the player with its bite attack. It just stops what it's doing, and it goes to its bite state immediately. And in its bite state, since we're talking about it, so first I check to see if the bite has started. If it hasn't started, then I start up the bite. Basically, first I want to look at the player, make sure I'm looking at the player and not just like biting at nothing, essentially. This is to basically make it less janky, because sometimes, depending on where the player is, as soon as this happens, it'll like move backwards, even though it's looking one way. And then I change to the bite state, to the bite sprites rather. And that's just the animation for the bites, we've already seen that. And then I set start to choose so we don't go back in here. And then basically I initiate the attack itself. And then after that, I basically initiate the attack itself. This happens when basically the bite comes down. It chomps down on the player. It'll create that an effect, which basically is just an area which hurts the player. And it moves a little bit forward, similar to Rose. And then after that, it'll set up a timer. And what this timer is like gives the bite a moment where it's kind of in that state where it's chomped down. So it's kind of like not stunned, but it's recoiling. So once the timer times out, it'll delete that effect and basically change the sprites to the recovery sprites. And once it's the recovery sprites and it's done animating that that recovery animation, it'll basically go back to the default state and just wait 1 second in the default state. So basically, it just spends a second in the default state, and then it'll again go through the whole rigmarole of selecting a decision. So the only thing we have left to talk about is the slam state. So let's just get right into it. The slam state is a bit more involved, but it's basically the same sort of logic. I'm going to try to speed through this because it's basically just a bunch of if-else conditions and checking. Same sort of logic where, like, if it started, then I want to look towards the player and go to the appropriate sprites. At the end of the jump sprites, essentially, that's what this is. At the end of the jump sprites, it's now rising up. So basically, it does a thing where it recoils down and hops up. And once it's hopped up, it'll change to the rising sprites. That's that screw attack looking, like Metroid screw attack looking thing, where it's spinning around and stuff. It'll go up until it reaches the player's X position. So, like, if the player is if it's directly over the player, and it reaches a particular height, which is 250. That's just the height I've decided that it'll be, because it's still on the screen, but it's fairly high up. Once it reaches that height, so at that peak, it'll switch to that still sprite, and then for a split second, and then it'll fall right down and do that squash and stretch thing. And then when it hits the ground, it basically makes the impact, that shock sort of deal. And after that, it basically primes itself for recovery. Once that sprite is over, it'll set itself to recover, and then it'll change the sprites. And as soon as the recovery animation is done, it'll go back to the default state and basically do the same thing as before, as the attack, as the bite thing. And that's basically everything that we've covered that I've done this week. Now, I'm not as far along in this boss as I wanted to be, but that's why I kind of set this up so that, like, I have this week from now until next week, where I can work on whatever else needs to be done. So what all else needs to be done? The only thing that's necessary is a menu screen, a loose state, and the rest of this boss. So the boss thing is the biggest thing. The loose state and the well, I guess the win state as well. So the loose state and the win state shouldn't be too hard to implement. It's just like at the end of this thing, I can create like some sort of area where if you enter it, it'll put up some sort of victory screen. Oh, and if you die, it'll put up some sort of lose screen. And the menu again is just as simple, where like I just set up a menu thing, have a play thing, maybe a controls menu, and some stuff like that. The biggest hurdle is still going to be this boss, I feel like. So that's what I'm going to be working on in the coming week. We're not going to be doing the organization of tasks on this thing. We're going to be done right here because I feel like that's just takes up too much space, too much time in the video, and I don't think you really care that. I don't think you guys really care that much. If you guys want to see that organization, let me know. If not, I'll do that on my own time. But yeah, so we're getting stuff done though. It's a nice time. If you are liking what I'm doing, follow me on my various social medias. I have a Patreon where if you want to support this game, you can donate a dollar if you'd like. Either way, if you don't want to donate $1, you can join my Discord and talk to me. And like if you have any questions about this game, about like what it's about, what's my plan for the future with it, you can ask me that shit in Discord. If you don't want to donate but you want to support the game in some capacity, there's a couple of ways you can do that. So I have a community submissions channel on my Discord, and the gist of that is that if you want to submit something to the game with the understanding that it's owned by the game at that point, then you can submit something to that channel. Now I say that just for legal reasons. I don't want there to be legal problems with this game because I wanted to put it out for sale. Everyone who have submitted stuff understands that they're doing something that they're probably not going to be paid for, and that's the same exact premise I'm making this game with. So hopefully that's fair enough for you. If you don't want to do that though, that's totally fine, understandable. There are other channels by which you can support the game. Another way you can contribute to the game is by downloading the Brave browser using one of my links down below. Basically, if you download it and you like it and you use it for about 30 days, I get $5. Why should you use the Brave browser? So the Brave browser is basically a Patreon the browser where currently they give you a monthly allowance basically of like about $3 to send to basically whoever you want. The default functionality is that it sends those money. Okay. The basic functionality right now is that it sends that money to whoever you watch the most, essentially, by percentage wise. So let's say you watch like 90% Game Grumps, let's just say, it'll like send 90% of that cut, 90% of that $3 to Game Grumps. Just as an example, off the top of my head. Or you can exclude particular like things from it. Like let's say you use like Wikipedia a lot and you don't want to send the money for some reason. You can exclude Wikipedia from getting the money and stuff. It's a pretty neat thing. I'm on it. A bunch of people are getting on it. So yeah, if you want to contribute that way, you can do that. Or you can send me. Or you can also do a similar thing by downloading my Streamlabs from my link below. That just gives me $1 if you install it. So that's it. I'm signing off now. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.